That's what we're used to hearing from the rock group Mr. Mister. Last month, Mr. Mister performed at the annual Vina del Mar Festival in Chile. Now, you may recall that many of Chile's most eminent actors, directors, and playwrights have been told to leave their homeland on penalty of death. On stage, lead singer Richard Page stood up and said, "I salute all of the Chilean actors who are frightened to death. The artists of the world are with you." And thus began an international incident. Joining us today is Richard Page of Mr. Mister and Charles Fullwood, the Director of Communication for Amnesty International. Richard, you certainly were aware of what was going on in Chile and that they weren't just kidding. Why on earth would you get up and make a statement like that, considering what could have been some harmful repercussions?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that what I said was not a militant political statement. It was a humanitarian statement directed towards the people who have been threatened. I wasn't saying down with the Pinochet government, down with your whole structure here. I merely said, we stand with you. What happened was the guilty party became very defensive at that point, and it erupted into a little bit of a stir for us.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, one of our stagehands, one of our guitar roadies, was threatened, saying, you're not going to get out of here. It's going to be very tough for you now. They sort of ushered me into a smaller room with the mayor and tried to get me to apologize and go back out and say I didn't mean it, that someone had handed me the statement, I didn't know what I was saying. Just trying to twist the whole thing into their favor, because you remember this, you have to understand this went on live television and live radio
and that's
throughout
a big event down there, isn't it?
Yeah, and they like to keep it sacred. They want to keep politics out of it because they don't want the truth to get out about some of the things that are happening there.
Mr. Fullwood, what is going on down there from Amnesty International's viewpoint, and why is the government so worried about all their artists?
Well, our information indicates that the Chilean government is engaging in a systematic campaign at this point to intimidate domestic dissent and to curtail people from speaking out against human rights abuses there.
And in particular, the artists, though, is that what
the artists are part of a much larger campaign. There's a systematic effort to intimidate the population. In 1986, over 20,000 people were rounded up and placed in athletic stadiums that were converted into makeshift detention centers. And in these centers, torture occurs, sometimes executions, and other forms of brutality. There are over 700 people who were disappeared over the past 10 years in Chile, and we suspect that the government and other death squads have been involved in those abductions.
Any more reprisals or anything else said after you were, I guess, summarily escorted out of the country?
Well, yeah, they were, I think my view of the thing was that people involved in the festival were really worried about their jobs. It wasn't necessarily like everybody said, oh no, you've said something bad about the government. It was the fact that it was their responsibility. They hired us. That was what a lot of the nervousness was about. But the press, of course, wanted to get to us, and they do have a thriving opposition press down there, although they're squashed somewhat, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, do you see anything happening, well, similar to South Africa, where the attempt will be made to boycott in any way the government as far as groups like Mr. Mister or others going down there?
I'm not sure about that. I don't really know about that. I have a feeling that from now on they're going to interview bands very carefully and find out if they're involved with Amnesty International or,
Did you have a chance to meet and talk to any of the people that were there, the artists at all?
A great question. I was called into the mayor of Vina's office, this woman, the next day, and it was almost like being sent into the principal's office at school, And she told me privately that she respected what I said and that she admired our music. I ended up signing autographs for her kids. See, the point is here that I'm making is that most of the people there don't like what's going on, in my opinion. And we got a lot of this from people, a lot of, wait, thank you, thanks a lot. I got telegrams from the actors. It's just one guy and a few of his buddies controlling a large country of very wonderful people, very warm people, and it's just a shame that it has to happen.
Yeah, Mr. Fullwood, in November, I guess the big push started with a lot of the threats, bombs being suggested in gardens, cars being threatened to be blown up and bodily harm and so forth. Yet much of that has not happened. Many of the artists have not left. Why do you suspect that some of these threats are not being carried out?
Well, given the record in the past 10 years, or actually the past 14 years, with disappeared people and executions and torture. We can only interpret this as being related to international opinion and placing the spotlight on these death threats before they're carried out, and with groups and people like Richard and Mr. actually standing up and making statements while they're in the country, as well as coming back here and exposing it. It is only the generation of mail from ordinary people around the world and from publicity such as this program here that's stopping this.
Would you go back?
Yeah, I would if we were invited back. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I just kind of doubt it. But yeah, I just want to say one other thing, that my opinion of all this is that you can change political structures and you can change people's ability to govern themselves. But when you take away the voice of the people, which is always the actors, the writers, the theater people, the literaries, then you really have no voice, and the people have no voice, and that's what was my purpose.
Yeah. Aside from thumbs up and so forth, did the artists in any way collectively comment or collectively?
They showed up at the airport when we left.
Did.
The president of the Theaters Union, he gave me a wonderfully inscribed dedication on a poster, and was very happy. And I feel they think that the heat's off for a while, and I hope it is.
There's the poster. Vida, what does it say? Vida de Liberté, or I'm not sure what it says.
Yeah, life.
Oh, Viva
Arte.
Arte. Boy, you just don't realize how lucky we are to have this country with all of its clamor and carrying on sometimes. Thank you very much, Richard, for being here. Mr. Bilal, thank you for being with us.